You know, there is this incredibly universal, almost painful moment that I think anyone who has ever picked up a paintbrush has experienced.
Oh, yeah. We've all been there.
Right. Like, imagine you are standing before this brilliant, radiant spring sky. You've got your blank canvas in hand, and the natural instinct is to just dive right in.
You see blue, you paint blue.
Exactly. You grab the brightest, most vibrant blue on your palette, you mix it with a little white, and you just slap it directly onto the canvas. It feels so logical, you know?
It does. I mean, you are looking at a blue sky, so you paint a blue sky.
But the result is, well, it's almost always a complete shock to the system. Instead of an infinite breathable atmosphere, you step back and you're just looking at a flat, plastic-looking blue wall.
Yeah, it looks like a piece of cardboard instead of a window into the real world.
It totally does. So today for this deep dive, our mission is to figure out exactly why that happens, and more importantly, how the absolute masters actually fix it.
Which is such a fascinating journey.
It really is. We are stepping directly into the visual process of a master painter by examining the methodology of artist Laura Palacios and GRUPO RAIIM. We're looking specifically at their documentation of painting a floral tree in acrylic.
And honestly, this is a perfect lens for this discussion because, you know, we are not just analyzing a single painting tutorial today.
Right. It's way deeper than that.
It is. This documentation gives us a front row seat to what is essentially an elite masterclass in physics, optics, and visual psychology. It's really a cinematic journey into how the illusion of reality is actually constructed from the ground up.
Yeah, you called it an illusion.
Because it is.
Yeah.
The plastic blue wall problem isn't a lack of technical skill with a brush. It's a perceptual error. I mean, it is basically an evolutionary glitch in how human beings are wired.
Okay, I was looking through the notes on this, and the evolutionary psychology aspect is just mind-blowing. Like, our brains are hardwired for survival, right?
Right. We have to categorize our environment rapidly to survive.
Exactly. We are built to identify isolated objects, a tree, a cloud, a predator, the sky. We process them all as separate, distinct entities with clear borders.
But the physical reality of light does not operate like that at all. If you want to paint well, you cannot paint objects. You just can't. You have to paint the atmosphere, the light, and the air enveloping those objects.
So the sky isn't a blue ceiling.
No, not at all. It's an unfathomable depth of suspended particles being constantly illuminated. When an artist tries to paint the thing instead of the atmosphere, they literally destroy the illusion of space. They're just painting a symbol of a sky, not the physical experience of it.
Man, that sets up the first step in this master's process perfectly.
Yeah.
Because it directly attacks that symbolic thinking.
It really does. It's so clever.
Right. So we start with this blindingly empty, stark, white canvas. And the very first move Laura Palacios makes to create a luminous, cool blue sky is to completely cover the entire canvas with a thick, opaque, dull, warm orange color.
Naples yellow, specifically.
Yeah, Naples yellow. She applies it with a sponge, completely eradicating the white.
Which creates this warm, earthy, almost pastel orange base.
Mm-hmm.
And, I mean, for someone trying to paint a cool, crisp atmosphere, it looks like a terrible mistake.
It looks like chromatic sabotage.
It does.
If the ultimate goal is a massive, cool, infinite blue sky, starting with a thick layer of warm orange feels like you are actively working against the final image. Because logically, orange and blue are complementary colors.
Right, they cancel each other out.
Exactly. If you mix them, they neutralize each other and just create a dull gray mud.
Well, they absolutely create mud if we are talking about physically mixing paint on a palette. Stirring wet orange and wet blue together is a total disaster for a vibrant sky.
But she doesn't do that.
No, she doesn't.
Yeah.
Because the process documented by GRUPO RAIIM is about something much more profound. It isn't physical mixing.
No.
It's optical mixing.
Optical mixing.
Yeah. And that mixing happens inside your eye, not on the canvas. When she applies that opaque Naples yellow, she is eliminating the unnatural glaring white of the raw canvas. But the true purpose is to establish a thermal base.
A foundation of temperature.
Exactly. A foundation of temperature. And because she is working with acrylics, she immediately seals that layer using a hairdryer.
Which the notes mention is a really crucial chemical step. Because acrylic paint is basically pigment suspended in a water-based polymer emulsion.
Right. The water is just a vehicle to move it around.
Yeah. And if you keep adding wet, watery acrylic on top of wet acrylic without letting it dry, the polymer binder literally breaks down. The paint loses its structural integrity and just turns into this fragile, chalky mess.
So the hairdryer forces the water to evaporate instantly. It locks that polymer matrix into a solid waterproof film. The warm orange is trapped.
Okay, so then what?
Then, over that dry thermal base, she applies a highly diluted, translucent, warm white glaze. It's just titanium white with a touch of ochre. She dries that layer entirely. And finally, the blue is introduced.
But it's not the thick, opaque paste we talked about earlier,
Not
right?
at all. It's a super diluted layer of cobalt blue mixed with that warm white and just a tiny pinch of raw umber to mute it slightly.
So it's basically tinted water at this point.
Pretty much, yeah.
It's just a translucent film sitting on top of the orange. And the physics of how light interacts with this structure completely changes how we define color.
It's fascinating.
Like when the ambient light in the room hits the physical canvas, it doesn't just stop at the surface. The light particles literally travel through that translucent blue glaze, penetrate deeper to hit that hidden layer of Naples yellow, and then bounce back out to hit your eye.
Which means the colors remain physically separated on the canvas, separated by these microscopic layers of dried polymer. But they mix together in the space between the painting and the viewer.
Wow, so it happens in the air.
Yes. The warm orange base neutralizes the artificial plastic look of the blue from the inside out. It creates this invisible tension.
I love that phrase, invisible tension.
It's true, though. The warmth of the yellow is vibrating. It's trying to push outward, while the cool blue is resting on top, naturally receding. And this perfectly mimics actual atmospheric physics.
Because in the real world, a blue sky is just warm sunlight scattering through miles of cold gases.
Exactly. By replicating that physical layering on the canvas, the master forces your brain to perceive miles of depth.
So color isn't just a substance you squeeze from a tube.
No, not at all.
Color is an optical event. It is an experience in time that only happens when light travels through physical layers.
And that realization, it fundamentally rewrites an artist's understanding of the medium. The canvas is no longer a flat surface. It becomes an architectural space where light is trapped and filtered.
But this architectural space leads us directly into a massive structural problem for the next phase of the painting.
Oh, right. The slick surface.
Yeah, we have this breathtaking, breathable sky, but because of the hairdryer method, because we evaporated all the water to lock in those layers, the canvas is now essentially a sealed, slick sheet of plastic.
It has absolutely no absorbency left.
Zero. So how do you introduce a solid object like the trunk of a floral tree into this space without creating a muddy disaster?
It's tough.
Because if you try to paint a solid tree trunk with diluted, watery paint on slick plastic, the water tension just fails. It's going to bead up, pool, and run down the canvas like rain on a window.
And this is exactly where the professionals are separated from the amateurs. The amateur instinct is to panic at the slick surface.
They just grab a thick glob of dark, opaque, brown paint to draw the tree, right?
Exactly. But a thick, heavy stroke of opaque paint would instantly shatter the delicate atmospheric illusion we just built. It would look like a sticker pasted onto a window.
So what does Laura do?
Instead, the master sticks with highly diluted paint, specifically raw umber. The invisible strategy she employs here is the absolute mastery of capillarity.
Capillarity, meaning capillary action.
Right.
Like the physics of how liquid behaves inside narrow spaces, like the tiny gaps between the bristles of a brush.
Exactly. Before the brush ever touches that slick canvas, she presses it firmly against a rag to remove the excess water. She eliminates the physical puddle, leaving only the pigment perfectly suspended in just enough moisture within the bristles.
Wow.
The tension of the fluid is perfectly balanced. This allows her to paint the structural skeleton of the tree, the main trunk, the secondary branches, right down to the finest twigs with fluid, organic growth.
No drips, no pooling.
None. Just controlled, solid form emerging on a completely non-absorbent surface.
Looking at the visual documentation, there is this striking parallel to cinematography here that I just loved.
Oh, the depth of field thing.
Yeah. When she paints the thickest parts of the trunk, the paint is applied with slightly more concentration, so it looks solid, anchored, and dark. But as the tree grows outward into the finest, most distant branches, the paint is so incredibly diluted that the blue sky actually shows directly through the wood.
The branches literally lose their hard outlines. They become soft.
Right, it creates these lost edges, and it operates exactly like a physical camera lens using a shallow depth of field, like blurring the background focal planes to force your eye to look at the sharp subject in the foreground.
It's so brilliant because lenses in cameras actually mimic human biology, which is why that edge control works so perfectly on the viewer. It taps into a fundamental psychological logic about how we navigate space.
How so?
Well, Due to the physical limitations of human vision and the density of the atmosphere, air isn't perfectly transparent. The more air there is between you and an object, the softer and less distinct the object's edges become.
Oh, I see. So our brains have spent millions of years learning to interpret sharp, hard edges as being physically close to us.
Yep. And blurry, translucent edges as being far away.
So by controlling the capillarity of the brush and allowing the atmospheric sky to literally swallow those distant branches through translucency, she isn't just drawing wood.
She is sculpting with water and shadow. True form on a canvas is born from the tension between what advances sharply toward you and what mysteriously fades into the background. She is quite literally drawing the air between the viewer and the tree.
That is incredible. Okay, so we have the air, we have the solid structure of the branches. But a tree isn't just a trunk.
No, you need the canopy.
We have to add the canopy, the flowers, and visually this feels like a massive risk to me. Like we just spent all this time painstakingly building miles of atmospheric depth and carefully controlling eyes.
It's terrifying, honestly.
It is. The amateur instinct here is to grab bright pinks and reds and dot them everywhere like little stickers, hoping it looks like a blossoming tree. But doing that would flatten the entire painting back into a two-dimensional surface. It destroys the depth.
Completely. It just creates a chaotic, flat wall of pigment. I mean, the basic rule of thumb in color theory is that warm colors advance toward the viewer and cool colors recede. But simply knowing that rule and actually knowing how to orchestrate it across an entire canvas are two entirely different things. The artist has to impose order on this chaos.
So she doesn't just start throwing bright pinks onto the branches.
No, definitely not. First, she uses that diluted raw umber again to sketch a rapid, almost invisible map. She isn't drawing individual petals. She is establishing visual masses and rhythms.
She maps out the architectural weight of the tree's canopy.
Exactly. And once the structural space is organized, she prepares a very specific palette. Warm white, Prussian blue, and vermilion red.
Okay, Prussian blue and vermilion red.
Right. And she executes the flowers in 3 distinct spatial acts. She manipulates 3 variables simultaneously: temperature, size, and edge quality.
The source material delves into the physics and biology of this 3-act process, and, I mean, it is just a brilliant manipulation of the viewer's physiology.
It really is a biological hack.
Let's look at the first act, the deep background. These are the flowers furthest away from us, deep inside the canopy. To paint these, she mixes Prussian blue with warm white to create these soft, small, lilac-colored flowers.
Which is really smart.
Right, because Prussian blue has a deep, almost greenish undertone that perfectly mimics cool, atmospheric shadows. But the real magic is the physics of how the human eye processes that specific lilac blue color.
The physical spectrum of light.
Exactly. Blue and violet light have very short wavelengths, and because of how the biological lens in the human eye bends incoming light, those short wavelengths physically focus slightly in front of the retina.
Wait, in front of the retina?
Yeah.
That is wild, because the focal point falls short of the retina. The tiny ciliary muscles in your eye, the muscles responsible for shaping the lens, actually have to relax to process that blue light.
And your brain is constantly, unconsciously monitoring the tension in those muscles.
Right. So when they relax, the brain translates that muscular data as, this object is far away.
Yes. By painting soft, small blue flowers, the master is physically forcing the viewer's eye muscles to relax, tricking their brain into perceiving deep distance.
It is quite literally a biological hack. She is manipulating the muscular tension in the viewer's eye.
It blows my mind. And then she moves to the second act, the midground. She introduces a little vermilion red into the mix, shifting the temperature from that cool lilac to a warmer pink.
The flowers get slightly larger, the edges get a bit more defined, and the imaginary air gap closes. The viewer's eye has to adjust slightly.
Which perfectly sets the stage for the final act, the foreground climax. Here she abandons the blue entirely.
Pure vermilion and warm white.
Yes. The paint application is thick, the flowers are large, and the edges are incredibly crisp and hard.
And the physics reverses entirely. Red light has a long wavelength. When red light enters the human eye, it naturally focuses slightly behind the retina.
So the lens has to work harder.
Exactly. In order to see that red pigment clearly, the lens in your eye has to actively bulge. The ciliary muscles have to contract. It takes real, physical, muscular effort to focus on that red foreground.
So your eye is literally flexing, sending an urgent signal to your brain. This object is inches from your face.
Yes. This completely redefines what depth actually is in visual art. Depth isn't just a trick of perspective, making things smaller in the background.
Right.
True depth is forcing the viewer's physiology to physically react to the temperature of the paint. The cool blue physically forces a retreat, and the warm red aggressively pulls focus. You are orchestrating a muscular workout for the viewer's eyeballs without them ever knowing it.
It's like an invisible choreography between the canvas and the human nervous system.
That is the essence of mastery. But what is truly profound is how all of these elements, the optical layers, the capillarity, the biological hacks, are completely dependent on each other.
How do you...
Well, if we synthesize this entire process we've just unpacked, those Prussian blue lilacs in the distance only feel like they're floating in breathable air because the cobalt blue sky is radiating beneath them.
Oh, wow. And the cobalt blue sky only vibrates and feels alive because of the warm white glaze sitting directly under it.
Exactly. And that warm white only glows because, buried at the very bottom, completely invisible to the naked eye, is that original layer of Naples yellow.
That seemingly crazy layer of dull orange is silently dictating the thermal reality of the entire piece.
It is. True mastery isn't manual dexterity. It isn't just having a steady hand or a good eye for color. It's a profound scientific understanding of how light interacts with matter and how the human mind interprets that light.
You know, the next time you, our listener, walk into a museum, or honestly just look at your window at a real sunset, you are not just going to see a flat surface anymore.
You really won't.
Your eyes are going to instinctively search for those hidden layers of trapped light. You're going to look for the lost edges where the sky swallows the trees, and you're going to feel the underlying temperatures pulling and pushing at your muscular focus. You will start seeing the architecture of the air itself.
Which actually leaves us with a fascinating, maybe somewhat challenging final thought to consider.
Oh,
Yeah, we've just spent this time breaking down how a masterpiece, something that feels overwhelmingly real, deep, and alive, is actually meticulous construction of invisible layers.
right, the optical mixing.
Exactly. It relies entirely on light traveling physically through matter, bouncing off hidden thermal bases, and interacting with the unique biology of the human eye. But think about the device you're using right now. Think about the screens we stare at for 10 hours a day.
Our phones, our monitors.
Exactly. Digital screens operate on a completely different physical reality.
Mm.
They don't reflect ambient light through layers of history. They emit light directly into your eyes using flat grids of red, green, and blue pixels.
Right, there is no physical depth.
None. There is no optical mixing happening through translucent glazes. It is entirely additive projected light.
It's a flat surface masquerading as depth, but lacking the physical architecture we've been talking about.
Exactly. So the question to mull over is this. If our brains evolved to navigate the complex, layered atmospheric light of the physical world, the kind of light Laura Palacios so brilliantly captures on canvas, what happens to our visual processing when we spend the vast majority of our lives staring at the flat, emitted light of digital screens?
Wow.
Are we slowly losing our ability to perceive those hidden depths, those subtle temperature shifts, and those lost edges in the real world, simply because our environment no longer requires us to look for them?
It makes you wonder how much of reality we are missing just because we've forgotten how to see the layers.